The Honest Money podcast is brought to you by Prescient Investment Management. We consider everything to give you the advantage. It's the future of investing. Prescient Investment Management is an authorized FSP.
Welcome to Honest Money. I'm Warren.
He's Pieter.
Pieter from Money Marks. And today we're talking about one of my favorite discussion points. If we're sitting around the braai or around the dinner table and I want to get some people's emotions going, I can talk about politics, religion, or this topic, which is buying or renting your house. And there are only two views, which is those that think they're absolutely right and they think everybody else is wrong. And so there are people that are in the camp of you should only ever buy your home, and there are those that think you should only ever rent. And then there is somewhere in between. There is the reality, which is it's right for some people sometimes, some of the time.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a very can get quite a heated discussion because I found very polarized. Like as you mentioned, like some are like, no, why are you 30 years old and you have not yet bought 3 rental properties? And then the others are like, it's unaffordable. I can't do it. So I'd rather rent and I like the flexibility. So what we found, or at least from my perspective, there's no real right or wrong answer. It's very situational dependent. So today we're just going to touch on a couple of factors to consider for yourself if buying or renting is right for you at this stage in your life and kind of the pros and cons of each.
Yeah. So I think you can, in the early days, I think when I first started writing articles about financial planning in the media, I probably wrote my first 5 or 10 pieces on you should never buy a house. And I got enormous abuse from some. No surprise, the estate agents weren't that happy with me. But then from a lot of people that were saying, but that's silly. You can't just live in a property and pay off the landlord's bond. And what I realized over time, that's the thing about time. It's a great teacher. Yeah. Is life doesn't work in a spreadsheet. So I will say, in a spreadsheet, if you had to do the calculation and make some assumptions, and that's what you have to do. There are a lot of costs involved in property ownership. There are big costs in terms of buying, and we can talk about those right at the start. There are big costs in terms of the maintenance and rates and taxes and all of those things. And then there would be costs again on sale. And when you look at all of that stuff, I think that the numbers tell me on my own calculations, and I've had some other good numbers people, better than me numbers people do these sums. It looks like buying a home makes sense when you plan to stay in the home for a period of somewhere around 8 to 10 years or longer. I did say life doesn't happen in a spreadsheet. Yeah. And so we've got to be careful here about just saying, okay, well, now those guys on Honest Money have said, I'm going to stay in this for 8 years or longer, I must buy. I'm not saying that. I think that you need to figure out a lot of other factors as well. But there is an argument financially for buying a house if you're just doing it on a spreadsheet to then own and live in for a period of time. And I think that 8 to 10 year number is probably the best one. I will say that having owned a home in Joburg for 9 years, so we're right in the middle of that 8 to 10 year period, I managed to sell that at a loss. So that wasn't the best financial decision. And then my wife kept asking me, what industry am I in? And I kept saying, I am in financial planning, and she questions my sensibility there. So understanding that you can be phenomenally unlucky when you buy a home. So it's not that buying for 8 to 10 years is a guarantee that you will make money or that it won't be the worst financial decision ever. There are lots of other factors to this, and I think emotion plays a big role here as well. Stability plays a big role, but time frame is maybe one to help us make a decision.
Yeah, I always say, like, if you rent, that rent you pay is the maximum amount that you will pay. If you buy, your bond amount is the minimum amount you will pay, because there's always those hidden costs. When you purchase a house, there's the bond that if you go onto the bank's website and you type in your salary, they tell you what you qualify for. That's nice. But then there's the transfer duty potentially that you're going to pay. There's the registration for the bond at the bank. There's the lawyer fees. Maybe there's some inspection fees. Maybe you buy the house, you move in, and now you realize, oh, they kind of painted over this area and there's a big hole. Now I need to fix that. And now the wifey says, now we need to redo the kitchen, and now we need to rake up some funds there. So it's a massive financial commitment that I think you should be cautious to make too early in your life when cash flow is still limited, because what I've seen sometimes happen is young people might feel pressured to buy a house, and then they do it because kind of been sold the American dream of owning a house with the white picket fence, and now they've done that, especially in times that like during COVID when everything seemed cheaper, when the interest rates were so low. Like, oh no, we can afford this, let's buy it. Then interest rates went up, and now just becoming more and more expensive every month, that you have to cut down on other fun stuff that you used to do just to afford your home loan, and then that dream becomes a nightmare. So you should be cautious not to kind of throw most of your income into a bond while still building wealth. I think once you've reached a bit of more financial maturity, you've got more savings saved up, and now at a point where you're married, you've got kids, and like, okay, I'm going to stay here in this neighborhood for 10 years, got a good school. Yes, then it could make sense. But so going too early into this financial decision, a house and a car, I think those are two big financial mistakes that many people unfortunately make too early on. And then that kind of forces you at some point to either sell or to go into more debt to just survive.
And I think maybe we should just talk about why do all of our, if not our parents, our grandparents, why do they keep telling us to buy the property? And I think just to kind of take you on a psychological journey they've gone on is, if it's your grandparents, they would have bought their house and it would have been 40 years ago, and they would have stayed in there all their lives, all their adult lives, and they would have said, I paid 50,000 Rand for my house, and today it's now worth 10 million Rand, and it's the best investment I've ever made. The truth is that it's probably the only investment they've ever bought that they've held for such a long period of time, where they know the starting price and they know the current value. And actually, if you track it back and you look at what that house has done historically in South Africa, all around the world, house prices move somewhere around the inflation rate. They might grow slightly faster, slightly slower, but if your inflation rate is 6% for 30 years, the likelihood is your house price might have jumped by 6.5% a year for 30 years. And the compound effect of inflation over a 30 or 40-year period makes it look like a phenomenal investment. If you're taking the same amount of money, 50,000 Rand, and you put it in the stock market all that time ago, you would be flying private, sitting on your yacht, owning your own island, and life would be amazing. And you would say, why on earth would I ever have bought a house? So I think, again, life doesn't work in a spreadsheet, but I do understand the point that it's not that our family and our friends and everyone are trying to derail us by giving us terrible advice. It's just based on simple understanding of inflation, or maybe not understanding the compound effect of. So I mean, I think to your point around costs, I also think, we start on this ladder. So we get our first job, we do rent for a little while because we can't afford anything else. And then we get our first increase. And now we say, you know what, I don't have to share a property with 17 of my closest friends. I can now go and get my own little studio apartment somewhere. I'm going to buy it. And then in 3 years' time, I've got a few increases. I'm going to sell the studio apartment. I'm going to buy a 1-bedroom. What you're actually doing is you're making the estate agents happy because you're rotating properties and they're earning their 5% every time you rotate. You're paying bond registration fees every single time. As you said, all the other costs that might come in all along the way. So I think if you know that you're going to be in a place, and it's very likely that you're going to move in a year or 2 or 3, the worst thing you can do is buy it, actually, because you're paying more and more costs all along. And there is this concept of, and I don't want to use too much jargon, but amortizing costs. In other words, you're going to pay 500,000 Rand, which is a huge amount of money as costs. It's transfer duties, whatever it all is. If you take 500,000 and you divide it by 5, that's 100,000 a year of costs that you've paid. But divide that by 50, and it's not such a big cost. I'm not even going to do the maths, but it's not a lot of money. And that's the point about spreading out those costs over an extended period of time. So I think that's maybe the first thing for me is, if you know you're going to stay in the place for a short time, please don't apply your mind to this. Don't buy the property. It's simple.
Yeah, I agree. And it's a financial component that I think many people are not maybe fully aware of all the different costs. And yes, those upfront costs, if you are in the property for a short period of time, it's much higher as opposed to 20 years where it becomes diluted. So when buying a property, and now we're mostly talking about property as in our primary residence that we live in. Maybe we'll touch on a bit of rental properties later on, but that is the financial component. Then there's also the how can I say, the situational component, the emotional value that we get from owning something. So it's always like, yeah, but I'm not going to pay the landlord's bond off, I'll own my own thing. Yes, that's true to an extent, but that's a normal thing. If you go eat sushi, you buy it from whoever, the restaurant, and you pay their bond as well, because they've delivered a service that you received something for, and you pay for that. Staying in a house, the same thing. You receive a service, like going on holiday and staying in an Airbnb. You're still getting something for that. So I think that's where some people get fixated on. Like, I'd rather just pay off my own thing and own an asset and have that ownership. Which it is nice to say I own a home, and yes, thinking long term. In retirement, it's better to have a paid off house than to rent. That's true, but it's not always. It may not always be the case. So what we're saying is just be cautious not to jump into the biggest purchase you'll make in your life, which can have the biggest impact on your finances and your cash flow, without being sure that this is going to be a good investment, because you should see that as almost like a investment, as opposed to just like a physical thing that you own, like a piece of clothing.
Yeah, I think it's an important point. You will always have to live somewhere.
Yeah.
And so you can pay a fixed rental every year and to live somewhere. There are downsides to that as well, and no situation in life is without some kind of a trade-off. But equally, if you own a house, I mean, it's an asset on your balance sheet when the accountants look at it, when the bank looks at it, but actually you live there. Yeah. And unless you live in a property that's got lots of rental rooms or whatever else, it's not an income generating thing for you. It's a place that you live, you pay rates, you pay maintenance, you might pay levies if it's a body corporate as well. So actually it does give you a place to be, but it also costs you money every single month. So it's not an investment asset, even if it is viewed as an asset. And I think a lot of people make that mistake. They go, I'm worth 5 million rand. Why? Well, because I've got a paid up house of 5 million rand. Where do you live? No, in the paid up house. Okay, so actually, how are you going to live off your house when you retire? Because your house can't pay you buy food.
Exactly.
So I think just give it a context that it's a lifestyle asset. Much the same as if you want to buy a horse. I mean, I don't think that's a lifestyle. Well, maybe it's a lifestyle asset. It's not going to generate you an income unless it's a racehorse. That's very good. So it fits into that category. It's not the thing that you're going to retire on, and that's okay. But it's got to be a clear decision. I mean, I'll give you the other argument, Pieter. I mean, so I'm married to a farmer, and for her, the ability to have a garden that she could change, that she could plant, that she could live in, knowing that there is a 10 or 12 year period where she can see trees grow and establish a community where no one could tell her to get out of the house because the lease ended or whatever, that had a huge emotional benefit. And so we made a conscious decision. It didn't turn out to be the best financial decision, but we made a conscious decision to say that need to have stability, literally to have roots, meant that we ended up with the world's most expensive garden because it came attached to a house. But that was okay because we made a clear call to say, we'll stay in it for a long period of time, not going to make us money. And that was the truth. It didn't make us money, but the return on life was powerful. And so I don't want to diminish the emotional aspect of this. For some people, emotional stability outweighs the financial stability. And they would make terrible financial decisions if they didn't have emotional. So I think it's clear to have a context. The best relationships I've ever had were with, over and above emotional ones, were with landlords. Because I think someone says to me, but I don't want to buy, or I don't want to go into a rental property because the landlord will just kick me out. That's only true if you've chosen the wrong landlord. So when you do your due diligence on a property, I would be saying, do your due diligence on the landlord. Do they own a few different properties? Do they have financial capacity to maintain the property? Do they want you to stay in there for the long term because they get value from you? If they do, well, that's a good call.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that the two key words for me is flexibility versus stability. If stability is important to you and you want to own a house and 10 years plus, I'll stay here. I want, ownership over it. I want to paint the walls whichever color suits me. I want to dig into the garden. I want to build a swimming pool. Then buying would probably make more sense. But if flexibility is more important, maybe you're younger, you travel around a lot, you're not yet established in your career, you're kind of growing and exploring and maybe taking risks, taking opportunities, going overseas, then flexibility might be more important, and renting would be a better option at that stage in your life, where you do have the option of staying in a certain area for a certain period of time, and then you can move, you can pack up and you can go, and that's the end of it. Until you get, I think most of us would want to get to a point where we can own a home. Just know that there will be a time when that is appropriate, but you shouldn't be pressured to get to that point in your life when you're not ready for that yet. Because, like, as you say, it's nice to have a paid off home in retirement, but you can't eat bricks for the rest of your life. It can't feed you. You have to have investments outside of that. So be careful not to throw all of your money into a bond if you're not also investing at the same time, because there's a lot of opportunity costs there as well where you're not invested in the market. So it's, again, comes back to I think that is the point that we're always going to bring across. Finances is a personal thing, but it's all part of a well-balanced approach to multiple considerations that you need to take into account, both financially and emotionally, and doing what's best for you and not comparing yourself to others. I think that,
if you manage your personal finances by committee, based on either what you see everyone else doing or based on what everyone else is in your circle is telling you what to do, remember their circumstances, their psychological approach, all of those things are not exactly yours. And even if it's people you love and trust, family members, they might not be steering you wrong. I mean, out of malice, they might just be simply wrong, simply mistaken. And I would say maybe just later in life, one of the things that becomes very important for older people that are either early or later into retirement is that stability is a big issue, and especially when they start to ask themselves questions about how do I get into frail care if I need it, like am I close to hospitals, all of those things. And in situations like that, you might find then that actually buying a home in a retirement village where it's got frail care attached to it and you get guaranteed rights to get in there immediately, those kinds of things become very valuable. And in which case, again, you might be making a very sensible financial decision. It's not based on an investment return, it's different criteria. And I think for some people, late stage, that owning a home where they know they can see out their years in one place and having that stability is important. And as I said, a lot of the time, if you want to get into something like frail care, if you know that's there's a chance that might be in your future, retirement villages where you stay in the village already, you get access to the frail care. Whereas, if you now have to go on a waiting list and you're sitting bedridden and you now have to pay for carers because you're not in there, that could be tricky. So I think this is complex, right? And I think it's good to understand that there isn't a no-brainer decision here. It's based on a range of circumstances. You mentioned buy to let property, so we've got to talk about that.
Yes, yeah. No, I know there's always going to be people in the comments like, yeah, but I do house hacking. It's fine. I buy a duplex and I stay on the one side and I rent out the other side and they pay off my bond. Excellent. If you can do that, maybe you do buy a house and there's a granny flat that you rent out and you generate income, which is important. Then yes, it can become an asset and it can help you. And building a property portfolio, that's probably like a whole discussion on its own. But then the conversation shifts, because then you don't see it as like that emotional attachment of it's my home that I'm going to build a life in. More like I see this as a business opportunity to generate income. And then, you have to start thinking about using the bank's money and debt, leveraging that. And I think then it becomes very important in the types of structures that you use it, because putting all of that in your personal name, that's you're going to run into trouble at some point. So yes, that is a different type of discussion that I think you can maybe also share some thoughts on if you want.
Yeah, I think just understanding that the moment you go to buy to let, you're not talking about property now as an investment. What you're talking about is running a business. It might not be your main business. It could be a side hustle. Great. And it's a side hustle that happens to be in the property industry. And so, we would always encourage people, if they've got a skill or an interest and they want to have a side hustle, well done. The same rules always apply. Do your homework, understand what you're doing, understand the pros and the cons, the costs, all of those things. For me, I don't have the ability. I know in my personality, I can't rock up at a tenant, if it's one of my tenants' houses, and issue them a lawyer's letter because they haven't paid rent for 3 months because they got retrenched, they've got a young baby, and I'll be that guy that says you've got a couple of months to go and you've got to get out. I just know I'd never do it, so they'd probably live there for free forever, and I would just feel guilty. So understanding that, this isn't just fire and forget. Some people would say, no, it's easy. All I do is I pay a letting agent and they'll manage the property for me. They'll manage the property for you until there's a problem. And then it's your problem. They don't own the debt. They don't owe the bank any money. You do. So you've got to do the homework. And, great, 5 rental properties that you've got 5 great tenants is wonderful. And until you realize you've got 5 assets, 5 big, chunky, illiquid assets in one city, in one country, that's not diversification. So again, I'm not discouraging you from doing it. What I'm saying is it's a business now. It's not an investment. You are crazy if you think this is fire and forget, where it's hassle-free and everything will be fine. In South Africa, tenants have a huge amount of rights. Even the tenants that are not paying you have lots of rights. It takes about 6 months if you follow due process to get a non-paying tenant out of the property. And if they wreck the property, 6 months of no rent, 6 months, where you're paying the costs, you've got to fix the property, you've got to get them out, you've got to pay lawyers. It's risky.
Yeah, and that's, again, if it's a side business that you're running on the side, that's a lot of stress that gets put on your personal life and then your day-to-day stuff, because it's not, maybe you're not doing this full-time and having to go through that. So as with any investment decision and any business venture that you go into, make sure you understand what you're getting into. Don't get caught up in the hype that it's passive and it's easy and, I just buy and then I generate income. It's a lot that goes into it. So spend time educating yourself and maybe have a mentor that can help you should you want to do that. And then there's also the technical side of the structures that you put it into, but we don't have to touch on that. But I think to close off, renting allows you the flexibility to move around, especially in a place like Cape Town where it's very expensive to buy. Renting allows you to live in maybe a better neighborhood and in a better environment for cheaper than it would have been to buy. Whereas buying provides nice stability. It gives you that sense of ownership and that emotional attachment. But it's probably the biggest investment decision you'll make in your life. So be cautious not to do that too early and potentially make a financial mistake that's going to haunt you for a long time.
Yeah, and so we'll close on that note. So I guess the answer is it depends.
Yeah.
I'm Warren. He's Pieter from Money Marks. Thanks so much for listening.
The Honest Money podcast is brought to you by Prescient Investment Management. We consider everything to give you the advantage. It's the future of investing. Prescient Investment Management is an authorized FSP.